Hey, it's your humble host, or if you prefer. So, Merry Christmas to start off with. I hope your holidays are going a lot better than mine are. Um, I want to make somewhat of an educational video about a particular job field just from my experience. Now, granted, I still don't know all the ins and outs of it because I haven't worked every level of it, obviously, and I've only had the job for a few months, and it's the lowest part of the job. And so, for those of you who don't remember my last video or y'all my update video, I was a nighttime graveyard security guard. Keyword was. I literally quit tonight a few hours ago. So, let me explain. When working or considering to work for one of these jobs, you will see the requirements or how they list what's called on-site, to where you sit on the property and you're either doing what's called a fire watch, where you are waiting to see if the building literally bursts into flames. Yes, that is what a fire watch is. And when you are doing a fire watch, you can't do anything security related. You have to call another security guard from your company to come deal with whatever may be going on property. You cannot do anything about it, period. That is the law in my state. So, also within on-site, you could have different post orders ranging from walking the property every hour or half an hour, and you have to check in. So, with that being said, when you look at the job description, you'll see on-site, you'll see patrol, you'll see part-time, full-time, starting wage, how many days a week, availability, all that wonderful jazz. Now, there's a lot of things they don't tell you, and to preface this is not every single security company. The company I came from, or just threw away, was not a corporation. It was a homebrew or a private company owned by one person. Okay? So there's a couple things that I want you guys to be aware of if you ever consider this job field. And remember, I was non-lethal force, where I was patrol, observe. That's it. I didn't do what was called arrest, where there is, trying to remember the word, there is refusing to be arrested, and then that's right, compliant arrest and uncompliant. Sorry, I just woke up. So I did not do what's called uncompliant, where I forced somebody on the ground and arrested them. I did what was compliant, which I never actually arrested anybody, nor tried to, because at that point, from what was explained to me, is you have to wait for PD to show up, and you have to wait to get your cuffs off of the person, and there's very few special situations to where you would even do a compliant arrest if the person even lets you. So, let's talk about my experience and what I learned, and I really want you guys to pay attention. So, first thing is pay attention to the rules, because there is a policy handbook, which in my experience for this company was complete and utter shite, was not fleshed out. And this is very important for anybody who has dealt with unemployment benefits and getting fired from a job and supposedly given the reason for your firing or termination. You would have found out and hopefully realized the rules can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So, with security companies, and again, this is just my experience with one of them, and watch out for this because this is really important. Take a look at their policy handbook. In my case, because they did update it after I said something, it was not fleshed out and hadn't been updated since May of last year, 2020. So, when issues arose, I would go to the policy handbook and realize none of this of what was being said to me was in there. It was not fleshed out. So, here comes the invisible rules. And let me explain just a little preface. Say, my shifts ran from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Now 5 a.m., which is technically end of shift going off the schedule. However, and again, you have to watch out for invisible rules because none of what I'm going to tell you, because I got written up for this, was in the policy handbook. So, your district, you have until, with this company, you had until 5 o'clock to finish your district, and that could range from anywhere from 30 hits to possibly 45, depending on your properties. Your district could either be completed from 3:30 to all the way past 5 o'clock, depending on how fast or slow you were, depending on how close or how far the properties were from each other, and how many quote-unquote hits or how many times you had to visit said property within that night. Now, to add a little bit more complication to that, certain properties could not be closed out before certain hours. Say, for example, if you had a property that is 2 hits, you would have 1 hit before midnight and 1 hit after night. Now, some property managers threw on, because whatever the property managers wanted got passed on to the owner and then passed down to us. So, like, I had one property in one district of mine that wanted their property to be closed out between 1 to 3. Even though I would still be following the 1 hit before midnight and 1 hit after midnight, the extra bullshit was, well, I don't want you closing out the property till after 1:45. And it's just like, okay, so so you deal with that. Now, going to the invisible rules, because here's when you're out patrolling with your route, you have what's called calls for service. Now, you want to see if there's a section in the policy handbook about calls for service. Now, generally, what should be in there is when you get a call for service, you're obviously supposed to respond to it, which means you do have to break out of route. And usually with that call for service, it is considered a hit. Now, in that case with calls for service, because this is how, and this is why it's important for you to have multiple conversations with your supervisors as many times as you can. And the reason why I say this is because for these calls of service, if your district is done, like I'll give you my situation, I got done with my district before 5 o'clock. The district I usually ran, I could get done with it by 4 and be back at the shop before 4:30. I'll just say that. And clock out and all that wonderful stuff with my car filled up and back in the garage, because you're also supposed to make sure your car was not returned below halfway in the tank before you brought it back in. If it was, you had to go fill it up. Fair enough. And I always did that. So, when I got done with my district, my car was in the shop before 5 o'clock. Meaning clocked out, I'm done, I'm waiting to go home because I was carpooling. So, call for service comes in. This is where the issue is, and this is one of the invisible rules you have to watch out for, because they only push this stuff when it becomes an inconvenience to their supervisors. So, I got done, and I was already clocked out. Call for service comes in literally 6 minutes after I clock out. Literally 6 minutes. So, my boss tried to get me to clock back in to deal with the call for service instead of having the 2 supervisors who are still clocked in go deal with it. So that's invisible rule number 1, because it's something I got written up for, because it wasn't in the policy handbook, but they only wanted to push it because it came at the inconvenience of certain supervisors. So you really want to watch out for invisible rules. And if they try to push you on it, push back. If it's not in their policy handbook, push back. You have every right to push back and do so properly. Another example which caters into this problem was how they defined end of shift, because this is something you really want to keep an eye out for. Even though I was scheduled till 5 o'clock, the end of shift was not defined in the policy handbook. And the reason why that's important, because this is not a normal job where you work 9 to 6 and you get off exactly at 6. This is not that type of job. 5 o'clock, whatever time the security company sets, and you, like I said, you have to make sure you understand this completely, is the time you have until to finish your district, because not all districts are going to go out till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Some districts you can finish an hour and a half early. So, with that being said, because what was vocalized and what you need to pay attention to how the supervisors vocalize certain things. In this case, it was the end of shift because I had spoken with the owner several times about the end of shift, which was, and also saw other employees get in trouble for hanging out on the clock. What they wanted versus what they're trying to push was contradictory, and they only pushed it at a convenience of certain supervisors. So, end of shift. Once your district is done and your car's back in the garage, you are done with your shift for the night, get off of the clock. This was told to us several times, and somebody actually got in trouble because they were waiting for their ride, which didn't show up until 5 o'clock in the morning. So, watch out for invisible rules and make sure, because this is very important too, if you can get all, like, if they're saying one thing and they're pushing another, make sure you get stuff to find and you get it in text. That is a really, really big thing because each company, the owner was really wishy-washy about stuff, and I could not get clear rules on a lot of stuff, which is something else you want to watch out for, because I think it's kind of done on purpose so you don't have a way to fight back. You want to, if their rules are not clearly defined with things like call for service, end of shift, what you do or cannot do, you need to be very, very careful and make sure you understand exactly, so you know how to back yourself up and you know how to fight back if they push it. Because some of these security companies are total shite. This one that I worked for, something else you want to keep an eye on is how much they work you. Be aware of labor laws in your state. This is very important because when I first started working there, the first 2 months, I was not aware so much of the labor laws, or how far an employer can push you, because it's not an issue I really had to deal with very often. So I found out, and when I look back at the schedules, I was working 8 to 9 days in a row for the first 2 months with possibly 1 day off. And what was promised to me, this is something you want to be mindful too, because this ties into the other point I'm going to bring up here, is be careful of falling for the advertisement during the interview, because what was promised to a lot of people was 4 days on, 3 days, 3 days off, with one being on call. On call means they have until this time to call you in, and if they don't, they miss the mark, they cannot call you in. So, on-call days kind of suck, but they do happen. So, it was a total of 4 days on, possibly a total of 2 days off, depending whether or not you get called in on that on-call day. So, with that being said, be aware of your labor laws and how many hours they push you. Because, for example, you could work a route that results in 8.5 hours because you were able to finish before 5 o'clock and you were able to clock out and go home, but then they stick you on a couple of on-sites that range from possibly 10 to 12, and you have 3 to 4 of these things. So be mindful of that as well, because that's how they can sneak more hours out of you. In my case, what was like the final straw is I was scheduled 5 days already, with 3 of those on-sites being 12 hours each. And because it's Christmas, well, I work Christmas, you're going to give me these next 2 days off, right? No. Some employers, if you let them try to work you 7 days in a row without a day off, had I worked all the shifts, I would have been anywhere between 60 to 70 hours. And it's not something I was promised. It's not something I was consented to. Which leads me to my next point, because this is very, very important, is you want to watch the workload. And no, I will not be naming this company because there are good people there who do not deserve the ire, and I'm not one to dox my employers. That's just not smart. You want to watch how much of the workload is coming in. I'll give you a perfect example. So this particular company, and I have voiced plenty of concerns with it. I don't have to worry about this crap anymore because I left. Is the owner taking on contracts and does not have the manpower? This is the case with this company. They kept having people fall off, and because of what I was able to find out, or because what I was told, there was a contract or several new contracts signed for a whole new district, and then you had one of our on-sites which was going to suck away 5 to 7 guards completely. So when it comes to the workload, you want to be mindful of how much they work you, because there was people who were like the supervisors were getting pushed 11 to possibly 15 days in a row. Sometimes some of the supervisors did what was called a double, to where they pulled a shift during the day, had very few hours of sleep in between, and then did a patrol or whatever at night. So in my case with this company, the owner was taking on far more work than what could be managed by the overall company without people being worked 7 to 8 days in a row. Something else that made this situation so much worse is because this company never stopped taking contracts. And that's something you want to be kind of mindful too, is do they have rest periods to where they don't take contracts from all these different properties, and do they actually allow time for them to build up their people? Because of what's going on with COVID and people trying to continually mooch off of unemployment, I'm not saying that this is everybody, but with this company, we had several cases to where they had 4 to 6 interviews show up and set up, and nobody showed up, because these were people just simply trying to collect an unemployment paycheck. This has happened several times. So you want to watch out for, and I know some of this is like supervisor level, but you want to watch your schedule, because of how much you get scheduled is going to tell you how much of a workload the higher ups are putting on everybody else, because there is no rest period. And I think one more thing, and I'm going to try to wrap it up here because this is already kind of like a long video, almost going on 20 minutes. You want to watch the dynamics between the supervisors. And the reason why I say this is because some of the supervisors are a little too buddy to where if you yourself have a situation come up with one of them, because this is also what happened with me. I had a situation with a lieutenant who is now gone from the company. And during this situation, what I actually did, taking care of a situation, was mischaracterized and misrepresented to the owner. The owner not bothering to look at jack all what happened, the camera footage, because we also wore body cams. The footage was not even looked at. So when I got presented with the write-up, first off, if you feel that they are completely in the wrong with these write-ups, do not sign them. The company is going to think you're stupid and that it does not matter. It so freaking matters, because it matters when you are taking these employers to task for unemployment benefits. It very much matters, because if you put your signature on that piece of paper, you are acknowledging that they are right and they have every reason to write you up for the what you're being accused of. However, if you do not put your signature on it, it means you do not acknowledge it and you do not agree with it. So some employers make you sign it, but if, depending on the situation, and you feel like they're completely wrong, do not sign it. This is something that my father has taught me, and it's something that's kind of served me well. So, going back to the situation. So the owner did not bother to look at anything, and I had to continuously poke at people. I had to pull the second higher up, the captain, aside and go, no, what got misrepresented, this is what got misrepresented. And I even got shown text message of what was told to both the captain and the owner, and it's just like, no, this is not what's on this piece of paper. The lieutenant is misrepresenting stuff. You guys need to take a look at this, because this is garbage. So I had a talk with the owner saying, and pretty much being told, well, I always stick up for my supervisors. That's good and all, but if you have, This is something to watch out for. If your supervisors or the higher ups instantly jump to the supervisor's defense without looking at anything, again, don't sign anything and push back. I mean, honestly, I don't even, if you have all these red flags already, leave. You just freaking leave the company. It's not worth it because they're going to continue to do the same garbage. So the 4 points I have so far: invisible rules, dynamics between the supervisors, labor laws. I think there was a third one in there, or a fourth one that meshed in there. But yeah, those I'd say are the main 3 to 4, because there's 2 of them that melded into each other, that you need to keep an eye out for. Oh, that's right, workload. Is the company trying to put too much on you? Because there are some districts that have ridiculous set of rules, all because the PMs want particular things that are not viable, nor are they efficient for the route. Also, be careful of, and I don't know if I want to label this as diversity or political correctness, because something else too, we eventually got told we cannot, if we had a problematic tenant, because certain, whether it be properties, apartments, whatever, they have the same group of people that causes the same amount of bullshit depending on the area. I had properties where it was always Latinos, Guatemalans, Cubans, to where I always had to tell, you can't park here. I had another apartment complex where it was always people of color doing sketchy shit in the freaking parking lot. It happens. Stereotypes come from somewhere. They're realistic. Do they apply to everybody? No. But they're there for a reason. They came based off of real people. So, anytime we had a problematic tenant and we had to put descriptors, we cannot put their ethnicity, much less their skin color, because some of the PMs started to get sensitive about it. And instead of the owner telling the property managers to biff it, because this could, depending on the situation, could have resulted in us calling PD, he just told us don't put the ethnicity of the problematic tenant. And just like, no. So you want to watch for that too. And I know that's something small, but if you ever go into this field, again, this is just the basic level to where they take anybody over the age of 18. They train you themselves. They require no prior training. This is basic level security, mind you. You want to watch for that because you are going to have properties, apartments, just certain areas where it's always going to be a certain group of people doing dumb stuff. I had another property where it was always white guys who'd come dumpster dive. Always. Always. So depending on the area that you're in, it's going to happen. This is why we started to profile people, and that's why certain countries still do it. America is just stupid and wants to be politically correct about everything. So, as I said, invisible rules. Make sure you know your policy handbook, or if you don't have access to it, ask for one. And if they try to push something that is not fleshed out in the policy handbook, you need to push back. I know there was one, because one of these situations where I was talking to a supervisor, and I really liked the supervisor, and well, you need to email the owner and tell him about all this stuff. And I thought about yeah, I will. And then I really thought about it again. I'm like, I should not be helping the owner of a security company flesh out his own damn rule book. I shouldn't have to freaking educate a company on how to do their own damn rule book. I don't have a business degree. I've never run a business. But at the same time, my God, certain things should just be fleshed out so there's clarification on what it is and what is not okay. And also, when it comes to the policy handbook, make sure it is legal. Because from what I've read, there's some security companies that have policies that are not legal. So, please be mindful of those. Again, going back over dynamics between the supervisors. Because again, and this can be true with a lot of employers, but you particularly want to watch the security companies if they're not corporate, because there are corporate security companies that have different levels of security. But you want to watch out, because if they jump to their supervisor's side right away and they don't even talk to you without approving the write-up, that is red flag number 2. 3, as I said, is the freaking workload. watch how much you're scheduled, and this falls into labor laws too, is you would tell by how much you are scheduled, how much of a workload they're starting to put on their workers. Pay attention to it, because if you run into these 4 red flags alone, there's going to be more. For me, I try to be patient, and because of the several blowups and because it's starting to get written up for visible rules that were not in the book, I left. I just freaking left. And communication with the higher ups, that's something else too, is a lot of people do encourage that, and I do too as well. But if you give them a list of problems, and I'm not talking about just like bitching, I'm talking about to where, like, for me, not including the glasses, because that's not something work related, I'm talking about if you start to have physical problems, whether it be your hand, like in my case, when I'm driving, it feels like the palm of my left hand feels bruised, even though I haven't done anything to it. And it's just my left side starting to have issues poking its head, so I got to get that investigated. But if you express all these things and have been vocal and find out they don't listen, because they were at first, and then they start taking advantage instead of stepping in and taking care of things themselves, you might want to leave. Not every security company is like this, but a lot of them are. Security overall is not a bad field, but when it's handled poorly, especially by private business owners, and you start to see what kind of goes on, no. Another thing that I kind of caught me, and it's everyone's own business how they let the employers treat them, so you cannot force somebody to tell the employers no, and you cannot change a situation if the person themselves is not willing to stand up and change it themselves. But some of the stuff I saw with this company, again, this kind of goes back to dynamics between the supervisors, is we had one person who was kind of a supervisor, kind of not. They had what's called the chevrons, which indicates a supervisor level, and there's different how many lines you have in your chevron indicates your position. This supervisor, not supervisor, is related to the captain of the company. Not everybody knows that. So again, I'm not naming this company. I'm not giving any indication where this company is at. I don't do that. It's not cool and that's not appropriate. But just from what I saw, because this non-supervisor was having physical issues, and just from my perspective, was getting taken advantage of for their nature. Now, whether or not they let the employer do it, that was totally up to them. But they had expressed grievances several times with having to be pulled in on their day off. So watch out for that too, because you'll see some situations where they will take advantage of people they call troopers. Troopers are employees who let themselves get worked to death by the company regardless of physical issues. These people are not bad people. I actually respect this non-supervisor a lot. And this person was actually one of my first trainers. So, with that being said, though, the situation is not good, and I had sent this long email of grievances detailing the more physical problems I started to have, because I am now seeing a chiropractor at least once a week to get adjusted due to an old back injury, which I now might be presenting other problems. I don't know. It's not excruciating pain, but it's issues where it's causing my arm to sometimes feel tired just by holding my things, which is not good, and I have to get that looked at. So I had expressed a whole set of grievances that were legitimate and something I had been vocalizing for months, only to be ignored, and being told you're not going to work me 7 days in a row, and only to be cited the sick policy. So that was the final straw. Anyway, I hope this video helps. There's a lot more I can go over in regards to the patrols. Oh, and it's one more thing too. When it comes to the workload, if you ever go into security and you do the routes, patrol, observe, report, there's quite a few times to where you would have properties appear in your route that weren't there before. I had one coworker, because we ran the same route just on different nights, kind of pull me over and go, "Hey, Kayla, do you know what these are?" And I'm going like, "No, I don't know why those are there. I have not been told anything, and I have not run that route for a few days. You need to go talk to a supervisor because I have no freaking idea why these routes or why these properties, plus this one, are back in our district again." So yeah, watch out for that too, because that's part of their workload where we found out the last minute we had new properties, and not all of them needed to have extensive training to where it could be talked to you over the phone as to what to do because they were that easy, while others needed a bit more care, shall we say. Without further ado, I'm going to end that here. And if you guys have your own experiences with joining a security company, whether it be armed, because that is a higher level to where you have to have extensive training and you do carry around a firearm, and there's a lot more restrictions to that. I did not carry around any sort of weapon. Again, I was compliant arrest. I just did patrol, observe, and report and escalate to PD as necessary, which thankfully wasn't too often, considering a lot of my properties behaved for the most part. I just got like dumb calls. Oh, somebody's dropping stuff on the floor, or somebody's stomping around, or like the one I had the other night was for a loud party and it was dead quiet. So you'll run into that stupid stuff where people will just call for stuff and there's nothing going on. Anyway, without further ado, if you have experiences, I'd love to hear them down below, and just be mindful when you do enter these job fields and they are the basic level. Be mindful and just learn to pick up on this stuff. Otherwise, you will get screwed over and you will get used, and they do not give a damn. So, have a good one.